Every Saturday morning, Knick-Knack Market comes to life. The street vendors are there almost before the sun is up, and by the time you and I are out of bed, the stalls are built, the boxes are opened, and all the goods are carefully laid out on display. Objects are piled high. Some are laid out on velvet, precious necklaces and jeweled swords. Others stand upright at the back. Large framed pictures of very important people, lamps made from tasseled satin, and old-fashioned cash registers, the kind that jingle when the drawers are opened. And then there are things that stay in their boxes all day, waiting for the right customer to come along. War medals laid out on straight lines, stopwatches on leather straps, and utensils in polished silver for all those special occasions. But Mr. Rummage's stall is different. Mr. Rummage of Knick-Knack Market has a stall piled high with a disorderly jumble of things that no one could ever want. Who'd want to buy a stuffed mouse, or a broken umbrella, or a pair of false teeth? Well, Mr. Rummage has them all, and as you can imagine, they don't cost a lot.
Okay, you guys, do not mess with me when I am somewhere.
Digby Platt, 10-year-old collector of antiques, was off to see his friend Mr. Rummage of Knick-Knack Market. It was Saturday, and as usual, Digby's weekly allowance was burning a hole in his pocket. But Digby wasn't going to spend it on any old thing. It had to be something rare and interesting for his collection, something from Mr. Rummage's incredible stall. Hannah, his older sister, had come along too. She had secret doubts about the value of Mr. Rummage's goods, and felt for some big sisterly reason that she had to stop her brother from buying useless junk. As Hannah and Digby approached Mr. Rummage's stall, they saw a bright green Jeep swing past in park. It was Colonel Carbuncle's Jeep. He was a retired military officer who had more war stories than even Mr. Rummage. The colonel used his Jeep to display all kinds of weapons and other army relics gathered from different countries around the world. "Hey, let's look at what the colonel's got stashed in the back of his Jeep before we visit Mr. Rummage," suggested Digby. "Just take a peek, Digby, or we'll be here all day," said his sister impatiently. "Morning, Colonel Carbuncle. Got anything new to sell?" asked Digby. Colonel Carbuncle stood up straight and saluted as he caught sight of the children. "Not new, Digby, never new, but I do have a lot of old stuff that I might just want to get rid of." "Wow, look at this!" exclaimed Digby. He pulled out an odd stick-shaped weapon out of the back of the Jeep. At one end of the stick was a metal axe head, while the other end was shaped like a smoking pipe. "What on earth is that?" asked Hannah. "Well," said the colonel, "you've found a ceremonial tomahawk, part axe, part pipe. The great Native American chief, Sitting Bull, used it to sit around a campfire and smoke that pipe with other leaders." "It's beautiful," said Digby, stroking the fine carved wood. "Can I show it to Mr. Rummage?"
Sitting Bull. The man who came to be known as Sitting Bull was born in 1831 by the Grand River, which runs through the state of South Dakota. This was an area of the Lakato or Teton Sioux. People called many caches after the food storage pits they dug there. Sitting Bull's father was named Four Horns.
Sitting Bull was chief and counselor of Teton Sioux Confederacy. His ambition was to bring together all the Sioux nations. He hoped that they could hold on to the remaining lands of the native people as a scarce inheritance. He called on all the nations to unite against the European settlers who were taking their lands, but in the end, he became the last great warrior to surrender to the American government. Let's find out more.
A young brave. When he was very young, Sitting Bull was called hookashing or slow because he couldn't run very fast. Apparently his legs were bowed, bent like the ribs of ponies he loved to ride. He was never seen on foot but always on horseback. Sitting Bull. One day all the boys in the Lakota Nation staged a mock hunt, with buffalo calves. During the game, Hukushin was thrown by his pony, and a large calf angrily attacked him. But the young brave wasn't afraid. He grabbed the calf by both ears and, struggling with it, pushed it back until the beast was sitting on its backside. "Hukushin has tamed the buffalo calf," the boys cried. "He has made it sit down." From then on, he was known by his familiar name of Tatanka Oyatan, or Sitting Bull, Sioux warrior. To be a true leader, Sitting Bull had to prove that he was brave. His first chance came when he led an attack against a war party of the Crow Nation. After a battle, the Crows retreated but left one of their chiefs behind. The man was lodged in a deep ditch, and he couldn't be allowed to escape. When Sitting Bull raced to the edge of the ditch and struck the warrior with his spear, it was clear the Crow chief had no bullets left in his gun. He couldn't fight back. So Sitting Bull gave his enemy his own gun, declaring that he wouldn't let a brave man die unarmed. Then he led a second charge. Sitting Bull was badly wounded by his own gun, but his warriors killed the Crow chief.
"Look, Mr. Rummage, look at this," cried Digby as he ran up to Mr. Rummage's antique stall. "That's a fine old tomahawk you've got there," said Mr. Rummage. "Where did you get that from?" "Back of my Jeep," said Colonel Carbuncle, "where these two young people found it. The Colonel says it belonged to a native chief called Sitting Bull," said Hannah doubtfully. "I'm sure it did," said Mr. Rummage. "That looks like a Great Plains ceremonial tomahawk to me." Carbuncle, "And of course, Sitting Bull is from a Plains nation." "Who lived on the Great Plains?" asked Digby. "Valiant warriors," explained Colonel Carbuncle, "who rode across the prairies that stretched from the Rocky Mountains to the Great Lakes and from Mexico up into Canada. I remember the stories my grandfather used to tell. He was there during the wars between native people and settlers, and he often talked about the great nations of the Sioux, the Cheyenne, and the Arapaho. The Sioux were the most powerful, or so he said, and Sitting Bull belonged to a small nation of Sioux called the Hunkpapas. They're the native people who hunted buffaloes, aren't they?" said Hannah knowingly. "That's right," said Mr. Rummage. "For hundreds of years, Sitting Bull's nation depended on the meat and hides of the buffalo for their survival. The nation followed their herds as they roamed the plains in search of food." "I've seen movies of cowboys fighting native people," said Hannah. "The cowboys always win. Were those the wars you were talking about?" "Not really," said Colonel Carbuncle, frowning. "Those movies don't tell the real story. No, these battles were terrible and bloody, and didn't show the settlers in good light." "You mean they lost?" asked Digby. Mr. Rummage looked at the Colonel. "Oh no, they didn't lose. Far from it." "What happened then?" asked Hannah. "Well," began Mr. Rummage, "you have to remember that native nations lived all over North America before the Europeans arrived. Native people hunted but only took what they needed, and they enjoyed a simple way of life. Without their hunting grounds, the Sioux and the many other nations couldn't survive. The settlers didn't see it their way, though," added Colonel Carbuncle. The United States was a young country with a lot to learn, and native people were treated like savages as settlers moved west. They took native people's lands by force or by making them sign away their rights." Hannah looked thoughtful. "But what did Sitting Bull's people do? With nowhere to live and no buffalo to hunt, they'd all die. They had no choice but to fight for their lives," declared Colonel Carbuncle.
Going west. When the first explorers pushed west towards the Pacific Ocean, they opened the way for many different kinds of people to settle there. The United States was expanding fast. It was the time for fur traders, cowboys, gold prospectors, and outlaws. But while they prospered, the native people paid a heavy price. Many nations were being wiped out, and their way of life was quickly disappearing. Broken promises. Some nations tried to fight off the settlers, but they couldn't compete with their weapons and armies. The American government even promised land in return, which was there in first place. And the most of these promises were broken, especially when gold was found on native lands.
Army forts were built and wagon trains crossed native territories protected by soldiers or bluecoats, as native people called them. Massacre at Sand Creek. When Black Kettle, chief of the Cheyenne, visited President Lincoln, he was president with a large American flag. He was told that as long as the flag flew above him, no American soldier would fire on him. After making peace in the Washingtons, Black Kettle agreed to stay on the reservation at Sand Creek. He thought he was safe, but early on the morning of November 29th, 1864, Colonel Chivington and his volunteer militia rode to Sand Creek and killed hundreds of Cheyenne. With so many broken promises, native people knew they could not trust the Bluecoats.